Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Spiritual Psychics TV and this being spiritual with me, your wonderful host, Ashley Robinson. Good evening to you folks. Happy Friday, 7th of July. Wow, whereas the first 7 months of the year already gone. It's wonderful to be with you this evening, joining you live on YouTube and Facebook. And I've got my good friend, special guest this evening, Neil Bryan. Good evening, Neil.
Hello, world. How are we all?
Well, welcome back to being spiritual.
It's right at my comfort zone. This is Ashley. I love your confidence, your introductions, and I feel like I'm listening to a podcast live. Then I realise, oh no, I'm part of this. Hang on, got to engage already, and that's just from the intro. So it's a pleasure to be here as ever.
I love having you on this platform, and of course you've had more of your own corner recently on Spiritual Psychics TV.
Yeah, we've given it a go. Yeah, there's the three of us, myself, Helen, and Suzanne. The two girls mainly, they're the Wellness Collaborative, and they're doing local work around the New Forest and the likes, markets, retreats, and also now very much a collaborative sort of podcast thing. And Richard very kindly invited us on to see if we could do it once a month for the wonderful SPTV viewers.
Fantastic. Spiritual Psychics TV, bringing spiritual people together.
Amazing.
Does exactly what it says on the tin. And in saying that, I'm going to have a quick look and see who we've brought together this evening. So, folks, if you are joining us for the very first time, this is a Spiritualist Philosophy show. We're going to try and put the world to rights and certainly get an understanding of the universe. And it's an interactive show. So you can challenge the status quo. You can own your own narrative. You can be part of our narrative. You can ask us all sorts of interesting, difficult or controversial questions. And we love spending time with you. If you've come back, thank you so much. It's wonderful to have you as part of the show. And in terms of helping build this wonderful platform, this station, please do remember to like, share and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, participate in the live chats, and on Facebook, just make sure you're following the live video, the main video feed from SPTV UK. So good evening to Phil Shaw. Saying hello to everybody. And then Neil, I'll let you do the next hello.
Oh yeah, hang on. I just need to change my screen so I can actually see it. Stace came and hung out with us at our show a couple of weeks back. Hello again, Stace. It's really nice to see you. Terry as well. Yeah. Hello, Terry.
Good evening to you.
All right. Terry was brilliant. It's contributed loads. So this is going to be already. I know it's going to be a good show. These guys are great.
Hi, Stacey, joining us on YouTube. Hello. Hi, Kev.
Hi, Kev.
We're trying to name as many people as we can today. Stacey looks like she's commenting in binary code there. Hand pink, waving hand pink. I'm guessing that was a load of icons, hieroglyphic sort of type communication.
Oh, connection there, Ashley. My best friend in school was Ashley Robinson. Is it the same? Is it the same? Do you know each other?
I don't think so. I'm guessing that was another Ashley Robinson.
Welcome, though, Jodie. It's good to see you again.
And hi, Tilly.
Love and light. Hello, glad to be here. Hello. Oh, you'll recognise you as well. It's a lovely photo of you both.
I don't think the emojis are always coming through on all the platforms today. We've got June Malkin waving with sunglasses and a happy face. Hi, June. And special thoughts and feelings to Dave, who's been really unwell at the moment, June. So sending him and anyone else that needs it some love and light.
Yeah, Soma, hi there. Soma Gangan, lovely. Emojis. I'm not down with the emojis.
Leslie Moulton. Reverend Leslie Moulton, our principal tutor in spiritual healing, spiritualist counselling. Good evening to you.
I met her at Spirit Seekers. She was lovely. Kim Porter. Anything for me, please? Probably not for me. That's not my speed, but Ashley's here, though. Thankfully.
There's always something for everybody. We probably won't be doing many traditional readings or mediumship tonight. It's a Spiritualist Philosophy show. But for those people that ask really good questions, I will try and do some little mini reads in between, and say get some good questions in, folks, about today will be sort of trying to sort of give you an understanding of the universe in many ways. Our main topic, just to sort of whet your appetite in terms of the things that we're hoping to talk about, is, I suppose, under the umbrella of the state of the world. Good entities versus evil entities, corporations versus the little people, governments, and we're hopefully going to give you some pearls of wisdom from Neil and I about how to possibly discern the truth.
The truth is what sets us free, I think.
And the truth is, of course, out there.
Yeah. And it actually is. A lot of it's on the internet. You can you can find the truth if you so seek.
Plenty of false truths and red flags as well. Gonna
Oh,
weed through the weeds. Yeah. Good evening, Dad. Him and my mum.
Hello, sir. This is for you, Ashley, I believe, this question.
How early can someone come through, early, Danielle? So yeah, good sort of spiritualist question. I think if you're talking about our spiritualist communicators, and of course I have a belief that our personality transitions through that change we call death, totally unchanged into the spirit world, they can come through immediately. Indeed, people have done it as part of that transition, seconds, minutes later, certainly within hours. Other people decide not to communicate at all. And don't do it. Other people go off and get a bit of rest and sort of recuperation in the spirit world. So yeah, possible for it to happen immediately. If you think about it purely from an energy point of view, then we know that we can't destroy energy. We know we can change it, and actually our personality is what transitions into that place that I like to call heaven. Certainly the afterlife, the spirit world. We have lots of different labels for that.
Fair play. You do give me tingles, and I mean that, and I mean that in a good way. It's lovely, actually. So you really you show a good light on these things, and I like that, and with depth as well. It's beautiful. Who's that? Suzanne Riches. Did you say you were from the New Forest, Neil? That's where I live. Hello, Suzanne. How are you? Yeah, I'm in the New Forest. Yeah, I'm not from here. I'm from Wales originally. But yeah, I've settled in the New Forest because of the ponies. So it's nice.
Beautiful part of the world. And for me, when I had the opportunity to do this show, I said to Richard, I want to be able to sort of communicate in plain English, predominantly because that's my palette. As a medium, I don't have a huge sort of palette of information, but the idea of being able to understand things in sort of a plain English, and the idea of being able to sort of share some of the things that I've become to know as truths, that was really important. So Love and Light YouTube was saying, I want to know, what is it the best answer to say to people who ask, do spiritualists believe in the Bible? Good question. And I think if you think about spiritualists as an umbrella term, then actually, I mean, do I believe in the Bible as a physical document? Yeah, I've seen it. There are various versions and sort of translations of it. Obviously, people use the Bible in different ways to quote from it, to teach from it. There are some sort of lovely stories. And modern spiritualism is only about 175 years old. And actually, a lot of the pioneers were Christians. So the foundation on which they created modern spiritualism was off the back of Christianity, and you had lots of sort of Christian spiritualists. I think that Jesus was a really important character. I see Jesus as a fantastic teacher, a fantastic leader. I believe he certainly existed, around 2,000 years ago. I also like some of the things that he's alleged to have said that are written down in some of the Bible stories. I often think he was sometimes misquoted. And as for someone that is spiritualist, been brought up spiritualist, but also has married a lady who's got Irish heritage, that is Catholic, we're bringing up our children, our 3 little boys, Catholic and spiritualist. I have some conversations about some of the interpretations, and then I think that's where a show like this gives us the platform to sort of talk about the difference. I'll often say things like, I think Jesus had a cunning plan, and this plan, was so cunning, Jesus could have stuck a tail in it and call it Basil, to think about Blackadder. But actually, when I think Jesus was talking about being the Son of God and God being Father, I think Jesus's cunning plan was that he was trying to contextualize what energy was. And he realized that in using sort of the context of father and parenting, actually he could describe the energy and therefore the sum total of all the particles of all the energy had this father-like property to it. People instantly got it. They understood in most cases their father, perhaps the leader in the family, the sort of provider, the giver, and that actually, in my own understanding of God being the sum total of all that energy, when Jesus was then talking about God, his father, I think he was actually talking about God being a fatherly figure to us all, and that God was perhaps this umbrella term for particles of energy. Now, when I was talking at work at part of our faith and belief network, I actually really upset a lot of Christian colleagues who said, I can't see anything in the Bible about Jesus and cunning plans and God being some particles of all the, all of the intelligent energy in the universe. And I said, no, that's my opinion. And some of my Christian colleagues decided to quote bits of the Bible to me, where they spoke about the fact that Jesus was the only Son of God. After I sort of said that I thought that Jesus was saying that we're all therefore the children of God. And when they quoted from Luke, I said, Luke also had an opinion, and Luke's opinion was printed about 2,000 years ago as part of the Bible, but it's still Luke's opinion, written sometime after Jesus had died. And actually, we're still, I think, unpicking some of that. We are a nation of storytellers. People pass on history and pearls of wisdom by sort of telling stories. The Bible, I think, quite cleverly put together some of those lessons learned, but it's full of contradictions. The Bible, full of contradictions. It often talks about mediums, the gift of mediumship, the gifts of healing, talks about Jesus working what people described as miracles by using those gifts. And then people will tell you that's because Jesus wasn't really human. He was the only Son of God. And then there'll be another paragraph that Jesus says, and these are some of the gifts that my Father, God, has given us all to work with. And if you think I'm good, wait until you start working with some of these gifts. And the idea was that Jesus was actually bringing these gifts to all of us to work with. He was saying, like a show, the Ideal Home Exposition, I've got this little product, it's called Healing, and you can see me use it. Would anyone like some of that? Well, it's on offer to you. And I think that therefore, in answer to your question, yes, some people do believe in the Bible, some of the context, some of the story there. The Bible is a story. It's a collection of stories, like a scrapbook of stories written by different people, interpreted lots of different times, and then not always interpreted from its first text. Interpreted from one language into another, and then from that language into another, and from that language into another again. And actually, there are some brilliant interpretations on the internet. Some of the direct interpretations. There was something which we read in fact at the Spirit Seeker weekend, Neil, you and I did an evening of philosophy where we tried to put the world to rights. So Peter Goddard actually quoted a direct interpretation from the Bible, the Lord's Prayer, to the same harmony and beat, where it used more language that I think would be traditionally associated with spiritualism than it would Christianity, in terms of the sort of several versions of that. But no, good sort of first question, Neil. What do you think? I went on a bit there.
Well, I mean, it's. I'm just happy to be here listening to you do that. That was sublime. I've got it. I mean, I've never read it. I'll be honest. I've never read the Bible. I'm very interested in it though, but from a slightly different angle. For more of I've looked very briefly into things like Decode the Bible. And the more I looked into things, the more YouTube videos were coming into my feed that they were pastors of certain faiths, of imams even, and they were sort of explaining how things captured in the various holy books is coming to light now as possible truth. So there's that to it as well, and there's very compelling arguments actually, which made me sort of sit up and go, wow, that is that. But then there's interpretation, right? Another thing that the thing that sprung to mind is how dogmatic viewpoints, dogmatic religious things that the thoughts of men, let's face it. So development of religion is the thoughts of man, and generally it was used by emperors, kings, and the like, Caesars, to control the masses in that way, shape, and form. So there's that weird sort of cognitive dissonance break between the Bible being a real thing, a collection of stories, and a lot of them are hidden and a lot of things untold. No doubt our beloved leaders at the Vatican might shed some light on those one day, who knows, but hidden things. So a collection of stories of faith, of religion, of acts of humanity from Jesus and the likes, versus a dogmatic controlling entity that's used that good word to then only control the masses. And that's why I saw personally, that's why I gave up on dogmatic religion when I was forced to go to Sunday school, and I drew a picture on a child's Bible and got told to go home. So I mean, it's horses for courses. But so do spiritualists believe in the Bible? You're saying yes.
Some do.
Yeah, and I'm a skeptic, and I'm saying yes, based on current things happening and things I can observe and see, objectively so.
I think you make a really good point about sort of religion in general, and as a medium, I give direct messages, sometimes channeled messages from a spirit world. I know your partner's able to do that through her art, and not
Yeah.
once have any of the spiritual ambassadors and guides come through and said, "I'm so glad you finally got it and created this religion called spiritualism." If anything, they say, why are the human, condition? Why is your human experience so fascinated with trying to label everything and create religions? There is no need for this. Live your life in a particular way. There are universal, condition that set the way that you have that earthly experience. Your body is your vessel for that personality. But actually, stop trying to create religion sort of out of this, let alone follow sort of other religions. So I'm very proud to call myself a spiritualist, and it's the way I sort of live my life. But I've got no religious text within spiritualism, including the Bible, that says that I've got it right. But I like to think I've got a bit of the jigsaw, and there's this idea of starting to see the bigger picture of the awakening. But in theory, everyone's got little bits of the jigsaw, and I think those that become really passionate that their bit of the jigsaw is the entire picture, obviously go on to create religions and sort of splinter cells from that. And look, all the different variations of Christianity, the different variations of sort of Islam and others, and all the ancient sort of traditions that are still coming forward. And that Bible stories, I mean, I always love the story of Noah. My middle son's called Noah, and I every time it rains I say, don't worry, I know a guy. But the idea of that story was quite nice in many ways. If you forget the fact that God was potentially this mass murderer that was going to take everyone out, actually it was this idea about cleansing, about coming together collectively, trying to save things, value the experience. And that story itself is thousands of years old and appears in Sumerian texts, with slightly different names, including specifications for the ark, based around sort of early civilizations just after the Ice Age. So I think these stories survive, and where there were sort of lessons to be learnt there, but control. We spoke about that human condition to want to control, sometimes for a little bit of fear. I think it is fair to say, and actually religion gave us some consequences of not believing and focusing perhaps on some of the negatives there. And that perhaps that was a way, in certainly in early days, of getting people in, collecting your taxes, making sure that the church was, sort of protected, but perhaps also at a time where church and science were the same people. They were very close in an attempt to understand and fathom out what the universe was all about. You had the church and religion and science going back to back, trying to prove the same thing. And although they went off in opposite directions for a long time, perhaps science are actually at the point of proving the existence of what we might describe as God within religious circles, and actually it's something greater than our sort of existence. And in proving that energy exists, perhaps scientists will prove that therefore God exists, if God is energy.
The June Malkin there, that's good, great comment. The world is like the tower card at the moment. All the dark energy is exploding before the calm. It's coming, it's bumpy, but the Earth's energy is changing. I think that, and I'm genuinely quite skeptical. So I'm observing it from that mildly autistic viewpoint, I promise you. So I'm seeing it outwardly like so I could debate things with people and make it really beyond reasonable doubt, at this point, because there's so much fact and of things like the energy and the like. And the thing with that dogmatic controlling viewpoint of religion is that has generally ruined it for people to find any form of belief system. So it's kind of like it's like, what those church people are like, or it's just kind of, and then it makes it actually more pertinent that people have it within themselves rather than in a non-mass sort of way,
Yeah.
But it's like in terms of spiritualism. So Helen, my partner, who does some drawings on this channel and the likes, has worked with Ashley. They've done some great work together. She follows the Celtic wheel in almost a religious sense as well. So in terms of, I'm going to murder if I try and name the things like Beltane and the likes, so the seasonal changes, and it's built up this wonderful ladies circle group of supportive feminine power around the seasonal changes. And it is like a religious practice, but it's very personal and very decent. It's not an in-your-face type thing. There's no controls. Everyone can do what they want. It's nature. Yeah. So like spiritualism in that sense, right? With the fundamental foundings of it being in perhaps Christianity. It's all
I think
freeing.
That sort of last point you made about people being able to believe different things and explore that awakening. I think that one of the phrases that I've become more and more fascinated with the last couple of years is this concept of what is psychological safety. And as a leader within the civil service, it's something that I try and lead by example on, create a psychologically safe environment,
Sure.
and actually find out what that really means. And then for me, leadership starts in the future, so it's about trying to build this picture of the future, but creating space where people don't feel embarrassed to put their hand up and ask questions or say something which could look silly, or actually they could be reprimanded or punished for. And I think from a religious point of view, there were many periods of time, if you take this country, where if you were to challenge the status quo by putting your hand up and go, I'm not sure I believe in that, what about this? You potentially could have been burnt at the stake. You think some of the way we treated people that had, what we would now describe as spiritual beliefs. And actually, although it's not happening in the UK and many parts of the free world, we've got lots of people from across the pond today, there are parts of the world that if you do not do everything you're told to do by the sort of dictator regime, if you don't practice the religion in the way that they have told you, it's a penalty of death. And actually, people are still coming to freer parts of the world in order to practice their religion or live a more spiritual way of life. But in America, I think I read a stat, 25% of adults in America actually identify as spiritual, but not necessarily religious. This 25. Whole shows 25% was the stat I read on Google.
That's a lot of people. Ago.
Wow. Based on those that completed the census. So it's a 25% of the, for every 100 people that completed. I imagine there were lots of people that didn't even know that the census or the sort of survey was being done. But they didn't describe themselves as religious at all, but they did describe themselves as being spiritual. And I think this idea of connecting with Mother Earth, this idea of connecting with the planet, this sort of understanding of energies, and for people that don't necessarily see God as a sort of figurehead, but they talk about energy and the energy of the universe. That in itself, I think, is a powerful awakening where it's safe to do so. People can start to have their own thoughts and beliefs without fear of death, and they can start to delve into. So, what is this universe all about? And I'll let you just sort of come in on that, and we'll just take Angela's point.
What is this universe all about? That's a really So I'm a believer, a firm believer, actually, in the multiverse. Now, that's going on a whole new tangent, right? But that's science, and science is the whole energy thing. I've got to get the quantum fractal computing, or whatever it's called. Richard will have to help me out with that. He's our guy for stuff. So the absolute computers that we'll never see, basically the most powerful things in the world, they've recognized that actually humans themselves, our brains are quite similar to these computers. We're working on the same sort of, so AI, that's why AI is relatively close to being human-like, because computing is the same as what our brains are doing now, quantum mechanics and the like. And anyway, these computers are now saying, these are things you can Google. These computers are now saying that our human brain should be able to view all 11 dimensions. And that keeps occurring. These messages keep coming up, and it's like Graham Hancock sums it up. I think he says that we are a species with amnesia. We don't remember, and that's when you then get these things cropping up. Religious pockets, 5,000 different religious sort of religions in the world at any one point. And it's and it's just because we've got this great amnesia, and a lot of people are capturing this in the comments, is that we are I think it was Julie earlier, we are awakening en masse, and I think part of that process is that we are going to be seeing just clearly for the first time in our existence, I believe. Angela and Martina.
Yeah, she was just mentioning, another sort of Catholic. Then her late granny came through, I'm guessing via a medium at a divine service, and said that there's a lot of things wrong in the Bible, and she wouldn't have been a believer of spiritualism when she was alive, but she does now. Yeah, absolutely. And I've had communicators of similar messages. I was demonstrating at Walton-on-Thames church afterwards. My mum and dad were in the audience, and actually, as a medium, I forget about 95% of what I've said when I'm delivering mediumship. It's always nice to have people travelling home and say, "Oh yeah, and part of this message." And there was someone that was making a sort of a bit of a joke apparently during the message that sort of said, you wouldn't catch me dead in a spiritualist church, but actually now I'm dead. I've realised I could come, and actually, it's not as much mumbo jumbo as I thought. And I think that people with, my mum's dad, my granddad Rick, that was sort of brought up as Church of England, boy, and had been a choir boy and altar server in the Church of England, had a very basic understanding of what life was. And then, 18 years after my mum was born, she met my dad and got married, and my dad was already involved in spiritualism, and he just sort of started to go along with it, because it all made sort of sense to him. The truth was being revealed to him sort of almost like one chapter at a time, and therefore was compatible. And I think that most sort of concepts and principles within spiritualism can be absolutely compatible with almost any sort of major belief, certainly sort of religious following. And one of the things that we were specifically going to talk about tonight was that the concept of good versus evil. And within my church at Wimbledon, one of our principles talks about personal responsibility, right? And it's, I think most spiritualists and most spiritual people will talk about, yeah, absolutely, we all have free will, and we all have personal responsibility. And in our church, number 11 sort of principle of the 15 is that personal responsibility with compensation by natural laws for the good and the retribution and natural, though sometimes painful, process of purification for all the deliberate evil done here. Now, this was written over 100 years ago by Richard Arthur Bush when he was channeling the principles of the church. But when I was talking to my 5-year-old son about this at the Richard Bush Lyceum, so Richard Bush was our founder, my 5-year-old sort of listened to the words and asked a couple of questions. So what you're saying is, for everything I do that's good, there is, effectively a reward, and for everything I do that's bad, there is a consequence, and that actually I will have to pay compensation. I'll have to level it up. And he described a police station in heaven, and he looked up because he thinks of heaven as a higher place or a higher sort of vibration. And he said, I imagine, Dad, that actually if you've lived an evil life and you've got evil, then eventually you will have this will catch up with you. You'll be punished, and you'll end up in a sort of a police station, probably looked after by the police angels. And he said the thing is that people that go there, they find themselves in a cell, but it's not until they leave that cell after making up for what they've done, they realize the door was never locked. They're in exactly the same place as everyone else that was in the afterlife, but they'd created a cell of their own making while they took personal responsibility for what they'd done. I thought, what an incredible way of a 5-year-old sort of articulating what that could mean. Hell wasn't an actual place; it was just a jail. Very American, that jail. But there was this cell. There was a cell in heaven, and you put yourself in there until you sorted yourself out, and you made up for it. That's what he thought by sort of the word compensation. And I think that when we talk about good versus evil, we're sort of saying that they're probably the two definitions of a spectrum of things you can do. You try and live a good sort of satisfactory life, and sometimes through unconditional love you give service and you do things for people without any conditions. Sometimes you put conditions on it, and then somewhere along that riding spectrum you've got deliberately doing things which are selfish, deliberately doing things which will cause pain or discomfort, deliberately doing things because you can, and then actually you kind of start to approach that evil category, somewhere between sort of Buddha and Hitler. Right, riding spectrum of good and evil, but understanding that the sort of difference, I think, between that and having the personal responsibility to make those decisions is quite powerful. So I'm hoping that we'll take James's point in a moment, but this will hopefully be our little segue into discussing sort of good versus evil, and perhaps good entities, beings versus evil. So I'll let you take that in for a minute and think while I read James's point. So James says, I don't know if you're aware of this, but some states actually encourage children to be taking into care if the parents are goths or follow anything they consider anti-Christ. I'd become aware about that only about 10 years ago, James, when I'd been in America. And one of the places I really wanted to visit was Lynchburg in Tennessee, because it's the birthplace of one of my favorite bourbons, Jack Daniels. And in doing so, I was really surprised to learn that Lynchburg, Tennessee was a dry state. You couldn't actually legally buy any alcohol in Lynchburg, Tennessee. And it had a lot of this sort of very, very strict I suppose what you describe as sort of Christian. And then I started to realize about some of these other areas, and it's like, actually, if you don't do what is prescribed, there's going to be serious sort of punishments for that. And
Dogma.
So, yeah, I work as a civil servant. I've worked with civil servants in America, and trying to understand sort of federal law, which governs all of the states, which was meant to be there for the overall holistic good of the United States of America. But within states, you can have all of your own rules and legislation. It seems absolutely amazing. You know, you can end up at federal law saying that marijuana is illegal, but then in the California state say marijuana is good, and here you can have a permit to grow 99 of your own plants. So you know, federal law versus sort of state law, how different that can be in that free world. So no, thank you for showing that, my friend. So just before we take Katie's point, then Neil, good and evil. I spoke about the rising scale. You know, I mean, it's probably a few more categories than, you know, Buddha at one end and Hitler at the end. But you know, what is your take of that? Personal responsibility, good and evil.
I'm glad you asked, actually, because my take on it and my seemingly now my life's work so far is around the two different entities that is very objectively viewed, and that is people who are narcissistically challenged and people who are codependent. Now, I can help religious people who are experiencing narcissistic abuse or emotional abuse or have emotional trauma. I can help them understand that when I coach or talk by expressing it in the terms of good versus evil. So I'd say, you know, that person is an evil person. They are, however you want to view it, understanding the good and evil from your own subjective perspective is just as important as somebody explaining to you what good versus evil is. But my hope is actually that now in 2023, it's pretty obvious. Like, it's quite obvious that there are very much entities in the world. However you want to assign them, you can assign them as evil, you can assign them as narcissists. I like to call them corporations, and they are only ever looking out for the bottom line. And those people who are less humanity, more financial gains in terms of like capitalism, if you like, their whole ideation is just to make money and forget about the little person. I was in the military for 22 years, and I gave up really the right to be a citizen for that period, and I became a number. And a lot of people do that in the military. So it's these constructs. They're not made by people who. Now, I'm talking nowadays. The construct of our being, our society, if you like, or where we are now, has been through has been through its renaissance, has been through the Victorian period of growth and engineering and building, and now we're in the electronic age where anyone that's got a misaligned version of what love is from terrible parenting ends up, you know, could end up on the TikTok, for example, or shaking their booty, whatever, on the YouTube shorts, and basically that sort of deliberation, that corruption of childhood, if you like, through the means of like the spiritual world can call this, and it is energy. You know, it's a telephone. It's a piece of tech that's been ones and zeros, binary is coming into it and going out of it on an exchange on billions of times over. Anyway, and it's a playground for narcissism. So that and the corporations, I think, is what you can view as evil today. That's my broad. I could get on a proper soapbox here, Ashley, but I don't think anyone got time for that.
No, we've got the SPTV soapbox, so we can certainly use it to provoke good conversation. I think that, again, free world. You know, we don't have to worry about the government, you know, listening to a conversation and muting us live in air. There are lots of parts of the world that we couldn't have these conversations.
Ashley, I mean, look at the question that's on the screen, Ashley.
Okay, so how do you know a fake psychic versus an authentic psychic? This is a question from Terry. I feel it's a gift, but so many just want to scam for money.
Can I say something on that?
Of course you can.
Okay? Surprisingly, and I'm not the spiritualist guy here. This is very much your ballpark. But for my objective, I keep saying that word, don't I? But it's very important, and the reason I keep saying it is because we'll come around to discernment later on and how to discern things from a factual, evidential viewpoint, shall we say. So I've seen a couple of mediums. I'm a healthy skeptic. My partner's a medium, does channeled art, and I'm in this world now where there's wonderful people, Ashley, to name but a few, and a couple of others I've seen live doing their wares, and I have been blown away. I've been blown away, but it's only a small handful of people. there's quite a lot out there that aren't all that. And my best anecdotal thing from that is I was sat second row back in an audience, down on it was I don't want to say the event, but it wasn't Spirit Seekers, let's just say that. Okay, so I sat in this audience 2 rows back, and this lady who was hyped up came onto the stage, and I remember her crystal clear. I can imagine Helen in the kitchen now listening to this, giggling away because she knows what I'm about to say. This lady said something that stuck with me. She said, "I believe in spirit. I don't believe any of you lot." So if I say a challenge, if I say something, something's come through, and you say that's not me, I can't take it, is the lingo, right? Then she said, basically, you're all liars, and I believe in spirit. So I was like, she's got that wrong. Clearly, she didn't mean to say that, right? So then she picks on this poor lady, sat right in front of me, and she says, "Oh, I've got something coming through. And it's for you, lady. Can you take my message?" And this poor woman said, "Yeah, absolutely." And she was obviously quite skeptical. And the woman said, "Edward or Ted or something like this. Edward, Ted's coming through." And the poor girl went, "No, I can't. That's not for me." She went, No, it has to be for you. I believe in spirit. Don't lie to me. Stop blocking me. There's a Ted or Edward in your life." And this poor lady, 3 times she challenged her, and 3 times the poor girl went, "I'm really sorry, but that's not for me." And it was diabolical. It really sort of showed me, actually, and I was doing a lot of work for looking at spiritual narcissism, spiritual ego, a lot of written work, a lot of investigative stuff, and I was seeing that clear, distinct difference between skilled, decent, supportive, loving messages from beyond or from self or from spirit or wherever, outwardly presented to the egotistical, controlling, diabolical, traumatized people. So there are people, right? I'm sorry I went on a bit there, but
No. I mean, I think it's a really good example, and I would always sort of stop by unpicking that word, because I think there's difference between a psychic and a medium. Mediumship for me, spiritualist mediumship, and I'm proud to call myself a spiritualist medium, is evidence of life after death with a communicator who you understand. And I can work at a mediumship level where I give you someone that claims to know you, and I always use that phrase. And for me, it was the way I was brought up, but the way my grandfather, my dad would instruct me, my circle leaders, until this person is accepted. Even if they're telling you what they believe to be the truth, unless the human being having a human experience accepts the communicator, it's only a claim. If they claim to know him, then he should be able to prove it, and that's mediumship. Whereas at a psychic level, it's more about the energy. You can pick up an object and you can read the energy of the object. You can read a person to a certain extent. I mean, within spiritualism, we shouldn't be cold reading people, but you might be like, for instance, working with cards, oracle cards, tarot cards, even playing cards. You can energize the cards, and the cards can come out in a certain way. And actually, at a psychic level, you're sort of reading the cards. But the difference, I think, between fake and authentic, it's not always about money. There are lots of mediums. Take me for example. I'm blessed. I have a full-time job. Parenting. I also have a full-time job in the civil service. My Monday
you work
to Friday,
hard, brother.
And I earn a salary, so I'm being paid to do that. Other mediums are not in otherwise meaningful work, and they're using the opportunity to work with their gifts professionally. And I have absolutely no problem with that. There's some fantastic professional mediums, and therefore they're trying to make money because money is what they need to pay their rent and pay for food. And then just because they're going to sort of make money, it's now a point of, right, how are they making their money? Are you paying them for their time and their service, and they're using some of those gifts like mediumship gifts or spirit gifts to give to you? Or are they working out how to tell you the things you want to hear, as opposed to things you might need to hear? And actually there sort of becomes the scam. And of course, people with callous intent would be able to do that. But for anyone that's sort of genuinely trying to work, for light, for love, unconditionally, and just earning money for it, not necessarily a scam, but it should be that you can verify it. And you should be able to verify the information. With mediumship, should be able to verify the communicator. And actually, therefore, there's no point, Neil, if I was reading for you, there's no point me saying, I've got a bloke here, claims to be a granddad, but I want to go back 5 generations, Neil. So this is great granddad.
The Viking.
Yeah. Do you have a great grandfather in the spirit world? It's like, well, probably.
No.
haven't been invited to any
You
family
know,
parties. No, it should
yeah,
be someone you know. And even if they know you
yeah.
from the spirit world, it's like there must be someone more relevant to you who they can evidence. And for me, therefore, you should better verify the mediumship with the psychic level. And this is why we sort of very hard when people turn up and they want their fortunes told, or they want to know whether or not they're going to meet the sort of tall, dark, handsome man or lady in their sort of life. Now, I personally think that fortune telling is almost impossible because the future is not yet written. There's also an element of within spiritualism, it's not about fortune telling. Mediumship and bringing evidence of communicators coming forward. Now, the caveat is sometimes from the spirit world, they offer the opportunity to perhaps see a slightly bigger picture than the picture that we have for our silent thinking about right now in the day. And therefore, if I was going to travel from South London today to the New Forest, and I didn't know how I was going to get there, and I said to Spirit, how am I going to get there? It's not so much fortune telling, it's Spirit knowing, but there's only a handful of ways, Ash. You can get to the New Forest. You can drive, you can take the train, you can fly.
Just follow
Actually,
the smell of horse poo.
yeah, the most direct way, is this. And therefore, when Spirit are giving us stuff, it's because they know that we're on a path. They know we have an intention to sort of get somewhere. And when they come in and I think give a sort of advice. So yeah, always verify your communicator. Ask the person, where are you getting this information from? Are you reading me? Have you got someone in the afterlife, the spirit world, that's giving you this information? And if they can't tell you where the information is coming from, then they've certainly not been very well trained. The second point is that they might not know where the information has come from, or they might be making it up. So I think, always test your communicator, test the people that you're paying for a service, find out what it is that they're actually doing. And under the Consumer Act now, folks, if you can't deliver what you say you're going to deliver and it is for monetary value, it is a criminal offence. Now, within some spiritualist organisations, you'll hear this phrase, entertainment. And there's a caveat. So under the Consumer Act, I am charging you entrance to this event today for the purposes of entertainment. And therefore, you should be entertained by the medium who's going to attempt to give you evidence of life after death. And therefore, you don't have a claim under the Consumer Act because you've paid for entertainment. Personally, I've never felt the need to do that. And even with my own private readings, I'd be saying to someone, if you're going to give me a donation for the church afterwards, then you must, within the first couple of minutes of the reading, verify that you understand who this message is coming from. And if you've not understood who the communicator is, then you don't pay for the reading. And for me, it's the same when you walk into a spiritualist church. Now, spiritualist mediums have to do what they say they're going to do, which is give evidence of life after death. Otherwise, under the Consumer Act, it would be fraudulent. So that's another way I think of looking for the fake versus the genuine. Go on, Neil. You look like a coiled spring, ready to bounce into action.
Yeah. So I was doing some research several months back, and was working on how to be a psychic, right? So, and what I was actually researching was how somebody who wanted to con people, how they would do that. And it is easy to discern between the two. It's very easy to discern between the two. And this information is freely online. So if you're involved with, there's also my own caveat with this is actually that the example I gave, that lady being quite horrific with that poor woman. But she was resonating with other sections of the audience, you see. So, and I think they were the fan club or friends of or whatnot, but she still, outside of that showmanship style on the stage, she still resonated with people. So if you're engaging with, I would say, as a healthy skeptic, if you're engaging with a medium, a spiritualist, or someone that can provide something, life after death, evidence of, just use your own discernment. And if that individual doesn't resonate with you, then they're not for you. Move on and try something else, and the problem is that people will go to these things and they might not get picked. They might, like if you're doing it live on the stage, Ashley, you might not, there might be someone that's been going there for months and they just might not be picked, and then they'll become emotional about that. Why am I not being picked, and this, that, and the other, and become obtuse with it all, really, for want of a better word, and call you all a charade or whatnot. But she could go down the road to some medium or in Bulgaria or some place deep in spirituality and have a reading. It might blow her mind, So it's discernment, but it's a slightly different level. It's more of a spiritual discernment, and does
Yeah.
that person resonate with you than anything else, I'd say.
No,
Yeah.
really valuable. And I think Darren Brown, who is an illusionist and mentalist, I think you just sort of described yourself,
Yeah.
tried to sort of show exactly the same thing.
Yes.
He also I think unsuccessfully showed that the average mediumship show, even at a theatre, wouldn't actually have the time or the team to go through and say look up credit card receipts and try and do credit checks on people to sort of get information. So in doing that, he found that reading people and asking those questions, and I think there was a good point there you reminded me of. As a medium, I should never ask you questions. I should give you answers.
Don't feed the medium.
Yeah, and most spiritualist churches or centres will say exactly that. And I'm still a big guy now with a healthy appetite, but I'm about 12 stone lighter than what I was a couple of years ago. I used to make the joke, don't feed me. I'm very well fed. But my dad, would never allow it. And he used to say to people, sometimes spiritualists are a nightmare for this because you're so happy that you've had evidence. You want to tell the medium, you want to give them verification and the feedback, but don't feed the medium information. And mediums shouldn't ask you questions, because by asking questions, they could inadvertently, even by accident or deliberately, if they're trying to scam you, get the information they need. So rather than say, do you know someone in the spirit world that's a granddad? You have a granddad on your dad's side that's in the spirit world? Rather than saying that, and someone saying, not my dad's dad, but my mum's dad, all of a sudden you get information. What I should say is I've got a man here that claims to be your dad's dad, and he is giving me the name Derek Robinson. He's telling me he was married to Hazel. This is my grandparents. But that should be the difference, I think.
But that, and my observation of that's what separates people that I go, oh my God, they've got something going on here. I don't know what it is, but they've got something going on. Yourself, young lady we saw, Joe, a few months back, others at Spirit Seekers, and it's what I find the greatest shame is that the spiritual narcissist, the spiritual egotist, the evildoers in that sense, using things like shotgun statements, rainbow statements, and trivia statistics, as they're called. You can look all these things up, how to be a psychic. It's all there, or how to spot a con artist, rather. But they just sully it all for the people that can, the people that can actually do, are really shunned because of their efficacy is reduced considerably, I should say, because of the charlatans and the experience of people going and just going, what is this? So if I only had ever seen that one person down the road that was rude to that lady in front of me, I would never have gone again to anything. But luckily, the young girl before her, who was visibly nervous, who was really sort of getting in the zone and scared to go onto the stage and do it, but blew it out the water, right? Absolutely. Introduced the spirit guides, no one feed the medium, and then wowed me. I was like, this is insane. Like, it was like watching yourself, Ash, and good stuff, right? And then the lady after, the problem child, she opened her set by standing on another higher stage and singing a Bob Marley song. So you're like, well, this is just about your laudatory thing, and your ego being massaged. Ash, have you seen that comment there from Katie?
Yeah. So I'll bring sort of Katie's point now. So Katie, thanks for sharing. Katie says a lot of religions believe in divine appointments with the Lord, the same as we know that the universe, which could be interpreted as God, and I certainly do, delivers divine intervention. So a lot of similar foundations, but religion seems to focus on physical beings rather than entities and spirits. And I think that the sort of that idea of a figurehead is really important. There's a lady called Birgitta Visa, who's had a couple of shows on here, Origins of the Ancients being one of them. She's been a guest on this show a couple of times. She shared an image on social media today, which I loved, and it was a picture of, to stereotype, looked like Jesus, maybe Buddha and a sort of a Hindu god, looked like they just sort of almost come out the pub, a bit merry, arms around each other, and they're sort of walking along. And as they're sort of walking along, don't you think it's sad that sometimes people think that just because we've been allowed to manifest this image, that they think we're the only one? And it was this sort of idea being that, ascended beings or guides, helpers, guardian angels, people that are working with us, that do have important bits of the truth to give us. Again, themselves from an ego don't say that you must now worship me and follow me, but there's this human instinct to sort of build religion around it. And I think that lots of the religions of the world, some are still doing very well now, have exactly that. And I once caught myself at the end of a night shift talking to some Mormons that had been knocking on my door for sort of a couple of weeks, and I'd said to them, come back next time. They were like, "Well, give us your number. We'll text you to see if you're in." And I think I'd given them a business card or something. Before I knew it, and I started talking about spiritualism, they were like praying outside my house to cast the demons out of this spiritualist sort of dwelling. And on a better day, after a couple of cups of coffee, I sort of came out and I said, let's have a proper conversation about it, because now I've actually read some of these pamphlets you got me. I want to say that actually you and I believe in exactly the same stuff. They're like, welcome, brother. You're welcome, brother. And I said, so your leader effectively was a medium. And there he was out there stumbled across the golden plates when the spirit world communicated to him, told him about the way to live our life. Said actually the rest was just a bit of misinterpretation. And they were like, no, brother, you've totally misunderstood the message. I was like, no, it's exactly the same. And even with Catholicism and Lords, I said to my wife, that actually the person that sort of founded Lords, if you like, said, well, this is now a special place, spoke to someone in what I would describe as the spirit world. Let's call it heaven. There's a word there we both met. They had, the Mother Mary come forward and say how important this was in the water. It's like, that's mediumship. That's working with the gifts of mediumship. And actually it's about spirit saying about energy and affirmations, the power of the planet and the universe. And, my wife, who is Catholic, Irish background and a spiritual healer and brought up as a Catholic, totally gets that. It's like there's the interface for her. She just doesn't need the labels. She'd still call herself a Catholic because that's what she's been brought up with, but she has that spiritual understanding. It's like, yeah, that's the interface. She goes, but don't start saying out the Catholic Church, Ash. No one's going to get that, because you will scare them by saying that it was mediumship, because actually that person was a nun. I think they were a nun, if I've understood the Lord's sort of history right. That they were allowed to talk to the spirit world. They were one of God's ambassadors, and they were therefore anointed in the same way that lots of priests and ministers from sort of some of the Christian faiths talk about this direct relationship with God. Even kings and queens of the country. We just watched Prince Charles become King Charles, and God's chosen person on the sort of on the planet to represent the faith. And I love the way that King Charles was like actually defender of the faiths, and he's tried to be a lot more inclusive in 2023. But
not bad.
All of this human condition. Want to label things, want to group it up, want to try and understand it and fathom it all out. So thanks, Katie, for bringing that forward.
Yeah, it's a nice comment. I'm right. My brain can't handle the whole picture of it. And I think when we did that event at the Spirit Seekers, we talked about the God of Spinoza, and I shared that around with a few people, and it still stands. It stood since the 17th century, and if anyone's interested, have a Google of that, the God of Spinoza. And for me, it kind of it breaks down the barrier between atheism, between dogmatic religion. It's for everybody. It's just about being one with nature. It's not paganistic. It's just a Dutch philosopher, Baruch de Spinoza, in the 17th century. He analysed religions. He analysed his feelings and thoughts. Philosophy is a lot of feeling as well, and logical thinking.
It's incredible. It's really you read that at Spirit Seeker.
Yeah, it's really something.
I'd never heard it before, and I've quoted it several times, including once on this show. It's absolutely incredible, and you don't really even realise it's as old as it is because of the simple language.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece. The God of Spinoza. I'm sure I'll send it to Richard. Perhaps he can provide a link somewhere to Google Drive. It's just, it doesn't take anything from anyone's spirituality. It doesn't take anything. All it will ever do is add to, in terms of any dogmatic religious viewpoint. You could read this and go, oh yeah, that's what God is, I suppose. And it's about finding God in the child's eyes, in a mountain stream, a smile from a loved one or whatnot. Yeah.
Did you say it was Einstein that when asked about God, had quoted that Dutch philosopher? Yeah,
Einstein had been challenged a lot as well about his religious viewpoints in terms of energy and things like that, because his energy research and things he was looking into were actually challenging dogmatic viewpoints of religion. So he had to come up with some sort of discernible answer that sort of quelled, stopped all the attacks basically from either side of science, atheism, or religion and everything else. So he was a challenging guy. Read about Einstein, wonderful person, obviously. But he was asked, doing university tours, a student of philosophy actually asked him, do you believe in God? And his response was, well, I believe in the God of Spinoza. And then he recited the whole text. It's really lengthy, but he recited the whole text. and the whole wowed everybody, you know, and that was it. No, everyone left him alone about his religious viewpoints because it's just wonderfully constructed. A lot of this is life's work for Spinoza, you know.
And that would, I think, you know, I heard it for the first time in this life, certainly when you read it that night, and it immediately resonated with me. And I thought, actually, that would be a definition of God that I'm very comfortable with, and it would be the you know, the presence I'm looking for. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sandra says, do you believe there are people on the earth who are heaven sent, as they say? Had something happen this week through pure circumstances, maybe fate, my partner's life has been saved, or it wouldn't have been. Well, I think, Sandra, you sort of answered that almost by sort of the evidence you've given. I do believe that it's possible. One of my favourite shows I used to watch as a kid with my nan had these sort of angels that would walk in and out of people's lives. If my dad's still watching, you have to remind me what the show was called now. It might have been Highway to Heaven. With these sort of guardian angels that walked on earth and sort of interacted in sort of people's lives. And here we go. Richard, producer's just saying highway to heaven. And I sort of always loved that idea. And, you know, I love the way that Hollywood has had a go at trying to fathom this out a few times. I think within Ghost, you know, and Patrick Swayze, when they're sort of talking about opportunities to, you know, do things, you know, Quantum Leap, Dr. Sam Beckett trying to put right which once went wrong. And as he stepped into the Quantum Leap accelerator with unconditional love, those bits of Hollywood, when you sort of add it all together as a sort of a bit of a scrapbook, I think you get some fantastic understandings of the universe. There's another film about two people that are in love in the spirit world, if you like, in heaven. And when the female decides to incarnate, the guy is like so sad to see her leave heaven that he has to rush back to earth to incarnate again.
Twin flames.
Yeah, and the idea is like his memory's been wiped, and he has to sort of fathom it all out through this earthly experience and access.
Soulmates, twin flame. Yeah. That could explain that, right?
Yeah,
that's I always think in Hollywood there's a lot of bad stuff also, but there's also of old, 80s to 90s, say there was a lot of good subliminal stuff coming out of Hollywood. It's a lot of truth telling, I think, about perhaps, you know, or a different viewpoint.
Touched by an angel.
Touched by an angel. That was it. I was I mean. No one ever woke up in my arms. I was a trauma medic for a few decades, and nobody ever looked up at me and said, "Oh, you're an angel." I got big ears. I'm just hiding them under this thing. So maybe they look like wings, but I don't know. But I think there are. I think there are people. There's all the work I do. My main life, if you like. I'm always, these people always just keep, every time I'm thinking, oh, I need to research this next topic, and suddenly, in my life somehow there's somebody there that's a victim of that sort of trauma, if you like, and then we discuss and we chat and we share, and I'm like, oh, I'm just absorbing all the information to pass it back out in a sort of you know, maybe a slightly consented, dumbed down way, I guess. But these people keep cropping up for me, and it's timely, synchronous. Is there a plan? Is there a divine plan? Is that what we're experiencing? Or is it that the people you've met that you think, oh, they're heaven sent, they're just people that know how to be good people, good humans, and you've just benefited from that, and actually consciously, known or unknown or subconsciously, your whole life you might have been dealing with people who are just not that good, and then when you finally meet someone who really steps to the fro and helps out, and you know, your partner's life is saved because of it, that person might be doing that every single day of their life. You know, for many other people, they're just a good person.
Yeah,
but the benefits are there of that decency in humanity, for sure.
Yeah, and I think as spirit beings, anything you want or need in the spirit world, all you need to do is think it, and boom, it happens. Now, I've had that evidence from the spirit world. But for the spirit world to influence this existence, you know, human being existence, it's much harder, and they have to influence other humans to influence, you know, because the universe works on this sort of universal law, and therefore, if sort of asked the question of why would you incarnate onto Earth? It's like to make a difference. I mentioned Brigitte earlier on. There's a video she showed me on YouTube of two young girls talking telepathically on this sort of YouTube video, and it imagines they're in the spirit world about to incarnate, and they're talking to each other, and her friend's like, why would you leave heaven when heaven's so amazing? We've got everything we need. Why would you want to go down to there, planet Earth? You know, the training planet. She's like, I've got to go. Look, my friends have already gone down there. I've got some family down there. Can't you see that they need me? They need me down there to sort of make an influence. And I love this idea that involved perhaps an element of choice to incarnate. have a personal belief that reincarnation is possible. I don't think it always happens, but I think it can happen. I think some people talk about one incarnation, but assuming that you can reincarnate, or that you can choose to incarnate the first time round, that perhaps there's this element of choice and destiny. Yeah, I think it's absolutely possible. Now, on that working assumption, though, you'd have to assume that if there's an element of destiny at play, then all the deliberate evil and all the bad stuff, that's people from heaven, an evolved state where the path of evolution and progression is open to everyone, that someone in that world makes a decision to come back and do something very, very negative in that earthly experience. And while I personally struggle to then comprehend that as a human being, my friend Ralph Steadman used to say, we're not meant to understand it as yet, but you will. And actually good things can happen as a result of the experiences, and that every experience is therefore meant to be.
That's exactly it. That's it. So then if the viewpoint, if the worldview or esoteric view is heaven is there, and angels, for example, or heaven sent people are coming down to teach, to step in, to intervene or help wherever, to great benefit, or to teach a lesson somehow. And a lot of people I work with, one of the things they don't recognize is they're never learning the lesson. And when they come to me is when they're realizing, oh yeah, okay, all right, that's 3 or 4 cycles of abuse, say, let's get off the wagon now, let's learn about me, let's see the lessons manifest and transmute it into something meaningful, make it a positive experience. But a lot of people stay circling the drain, don't they, in this day and age, in 2023 as we are, and never know how to actually climb back up and see the woods for the trees, or the light that they possibly are themselves. Sam, that's a good question, isn't it? Why do some mediums avoid nice mediums? I know we're all human, but if they are mediums, then shouldn't they get along fine? Some people just don't resonate with each other.
Egos, personality.
Yeah. It must, like, different methodology. Is that a thing as well, Ash? Is there different methodologies between different spiritual entities?
There is. I mean, a lot of it, I think, is personality, and most spiritual people will talk about, we spoke about personal responsibility, and that the human experience is effectively an opportunity for the soul, the spirit, to have a physical incarnation, physical experience as a sort of human being. And as you develop that personality, I think sometimes you just don't sort of get along with people, and maybe you've done it before, and that your sort of soul has gone through the motions a few rounds, it's done a few extra rounds, and you just meet people, not necessarily mediums and mediums, but sometimes you just meet people in life, right? And you don't like them, and perhaps that's because you've previously incarnated at another time and not got on, or you've had sort of wrong to do. But I think that that human condition in terms of belief, wouldn't the world be just a safer, peaceful place if people just accepted the fact that other people believe things slightly different to them, rather than trying to say, but I don't respect it, or I tolerate what you believe, but I know that I'm right, which still makes you wrong, and I'm going to tolerate you even though you believe something different to me, as opposed to I accept and celebrate the differences. So I think it's that as simple as that. It's the egos and the sort of personalities. People just don't get on, and sometimes even within spiritual, there are different, there are different sort of factions. Within the SNU, our largest sort of spiritualist organisation in the UK, most amount of followers, the most amount of members in the UK are SNU members. When you look at their principles, they talk about, they recognize Jesus as a human being, as a character, perhaps even a teacher, a leader, but they certainly don't talk about Jesus as the only Son of God, in the same way that Christians would. So you then find some Christian spiritualists that, actually have the Bible up in the church and say, well, actually, we think this foundation for Christian spiritualism is absolutely right. You sort of get upset. Now, there are some churches within the SNU world that wouldn't allow, say, crosses or stained glasses portraying to Jesus, or crosses, because the cross is a crucifix, right? It's where Jesus was killed. Jesus was an important spiritual ambassador. So even within the same sort of organisations, you can have these sort of these clashes of personality. I mentioned professional versus non-professional mediums. Those mediums that are charging, versus those that aren't, and then there are those that are charging £20 for a 20-minute reading versus £150 for a 20-minute reading. And ego plays a bit of a sort of part with that, because people think, well, I'm doing the same thing as you, but you're earning 4 or 5 times the money that me or my church were organising for the same thing. That can create a bit of ego and a bit of personality. But
Yeah.
we're not all great human beings. Everyone
This,
that sort of wants to walk a spiritual life aren't necessarily the perfect spiritual role models.
yeah, that's right. And it is hard to get it right as well. We have to really work hard at doing it. I'll give you a very quick anecdotal example. There's my partner and her cohorts are putting on this market coming up in September, like spiritualist day retreat type of deal. And no, it's a big collaborative from everybody's like chucking into the same pot,
Brilliant.
working together to make it a success, to spread the message and sort of try and bridge out actually between a sort of a grounded, healthy spirituality and the bloke down the pub, try and get them involved. And yeah, can I answer this from
Please do.
Kev? Personally, I don't like tarot cards. They're misinterpreted and luck of the draw. Now, Kev, I am deeply cynical. I was deeply cynical. I'm now a healthy skeptic, right? It's a difference, I think, to some degree. And I wanted to understand my place in the world. And I was answering questions on my writing space, my forums, and a lot of it was going down the esoteric route. So I wanted to try and get a grounding in it. Now, my background was a couple of decades serving in the military. I was a chef before that, very sort of logic-based, objective viewpoints, facts matter, that sort of deal. And there was this question about tarot, and a friend of mine actually, who was quite spiritual, said to me, "Have you ever looked at tarot?" And I said, "Well, I'll give it a go." So, in summary, I looked up in an objective stance 3 different people that I knew really well. So, 2 friends and myself looked up their star sign. 3 different ones. One was a Leo, one was a Pisces, and myself a Scorpio. At that moment in time, I knew everything about these 2 people, all good friends, and lo and behold, the tarot deeply resonated. So for me, in that moment, I was like, "Wow, what?" It was like, "Need to know more." I was like, "Yes, I do. I need to find out more of this." And I've treated it with a modicum of respect, but there's something there, and that tarot itself is the thing that led me towards a sort of a healthy understanding of spirituality, I guess. And people now tell me, "Oh, you're really spiritual." I'm like, I'm not. And they go, "What? Do you believe anything?" I go, "Yeah, tarot, mediumship." I'm just like, "Oh, maybe so then." But it's if you get a good reader that resonates. Remember, I said that earlier. If somebody resonates with you, so if somebody's sat in front of you and they pull out a load of cards and it doesn't resonate, just leave it. Don't get absorbed by it. Just be like, "Oh, it's not for me." But try another one, different one. Like if Ashley didn't resonate with me as a medium, I could quite easily choose then to view other mediums to see what resonates. So and that's why then you get a lot of the question previously about mediums not getting along, nice ones not with the bad ones, everything else. Ashley summed it up beautifully. It's just ego, really, and perhaps an awareness by the ego-driven people, that the likes of Ashley, and I'm just talking from my own personal experience, and people at the Wimbledon Spiritualist Church and the like, they're a threat to the people with the ego because they can do what they say they can do, and these other people perhaps aren't so good, So yeah, give it another go. Honestly, tarot, it just blew my mind. It really did. Ash.
I think yeah, I loved your answer, and I think it's finding the right teacher, or certainly the right person that can work with the cards. But on this show, there's an artificial intelligence character which is produced. I think it's Jake.
It's brilliant.
Richard, do correct me if I'm wrong. And to a certain extent, it shows with with a supercomputer, with an artificial intelligence at play, if you give a computer the right information, the right instructions, the right algorithms, the right background, and the right context, in theory, the computer can start to sort of read. Now, the difference between the computer just reading a tarot card and then the tarot cards perhaps being picked or selected, sometimes for me, I spoke about that psychic element, charging the cards or playing with them, or decking them. It's therefore then about the meaning. Now, in theory, as artificial intelligence continues to develop, it will read let's take, number 5 card. Artificial intelligence will be like a human being and actually have 1,000 different ways of reading that card, depending on whether or not it came in upside down, at an angle. Which card did number 5 follow, or what was it a predecessor to? There we go. And Richard, the producer, is already saying, again, from a programming point of view, starting to probe that in. And I think that tarot readers, in that sense, the more education they have, the more development, the more they sort of start to earn it. Otherwise, you can pick up cards and you can read them. Often on this show on a Friday night when I've done the mini readings, I work with my medieval card deck, and I sort of bring out cards. And you take the card like the death card within medieval. People go, oh no, death card. Something's going to finish, something's going to end. It's like, well, could
Rebirth.
mean that. Yeah, could be rebirth. Could be.
It's generally rebirth. Yeah, death card.
Could be end of a chapter, end of the misery, end of the conflict. It could be the start of something that they said, this rebirth, the nurturing. What does the card just finish, or what is the next card? Does death follow after destruction, which was like the tower and the siege around it and the fire, the medieval sort of battle? Or actually was death the start of the card, and the next card was the cave, the naked human being in the fetal position, and that rebirth followed by the green sap with the early morning sort of autumn days of dew, bringing the sort of the green sort of seedling together. So yeah, I think there's some fantastic ways of doing that. And Craig was just go on.
No, go ahead. No, go on.
I was like, Craig was saying, is the universe the force to speak to rather than God in any of its incarnations? And I was just going to say, Craig, I think the personal decision is up to you. When I think of Mother, Father, God, I do think of the universe. And my plain English interpretation, I did dedicate an entire hour show to this once, but the sum total of all of the intelligent particles of energy, that for me is what God is. It's everything, right? So I still pray to Mother, Father, God, because for me it's a convenient way of me channeling that sort of affirmation and attunement. But I often think of God as the sum total of everything, in the same way that we call lots of fish a school of fish. God becomes this collective term. What did you want to say?
If I believe that there is a God, and I believe he chiseled yours two handsome faces, Craig James. Look at them two, gorgeous men.
So very, very well groomed.
So there is a God.
The barber.
Yeah.
I need to get a bit of a shape up myself. I'm doing a spiritualist naming service tomorrow for my cousin and his baby Hudson down on the south coast in Little Hampstead. So looking around, I do need a bit of a shape up and try and get to the barbers in the morning.
I've let myself go completely, to be honest. The fact that I got headphones on is covering the fact that I'm now basically a hippie. Got really long. Wait till you see me next. It's like Helen managed to plait my hair the other day.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I need some
grooming. A man bun.
I need some serious groomage. Jodie's got, if you can manipulate energy though, can't they do the same with ill intentions? Yeah, I think you can do that, right? You can think, you don't have to, it's not all like what's the word? It's not all the negative manifestation of things for me is people just thinking ill of somebody else, like bouts of jealousy, petty egotistical things. That I think enough about that's energetically going out from resonating out to people, and that could catch on, and cause a wave of just sadness and whatnot. So yeah, ill intentions can create and shape and have a huge ripple effect, in as much as good things can also.
And birds of a feather flock together. So light attracts light. Darkness attracts darkness, and I think that based on your lifestyle, you can attract similar things. And for those that follow the show regularly, we know I've spoke a little bit about my godson Robert, who took his own life on the 4th of May, and how his lifestyle led to him making that decision. But I'm convinced that based on some of his dependencies and some of his decisions, there was an element of darkness that was attracted to him. Now, I don't think he was possessed. I don't think he had an evil entity sort of controlling him on making those decisions. But I do think that when his lifestyle was in more of a dark place, there was more darkness surrounding him, and actually he was constantly looking towards that light. And we said right at the beginning of the show we were going to talk about the difference between sort of the good entities versus the evil entities. And I think if we talk about entities as a personality or as a sort of soul, themselves a sort of spirit being, then we spoke about that sliding scale and knowing that people that want to help, in the same way we live our life, is it unconditionally? Is that love unconditional? There's a big difference between love and lust, and unconditional love versus conditional love, versus, I'll only like you if you do things this sort of certain way. Then actually those people exist in the spirit world, because I just said 10 minutes ago, the personality continues unchanged into the spirit world. So the way you lived your life, you enter the spirit world like that. Now, I think that although progression is open to everybody, if you've lived your life in a negative and dark way, you're not going to be able to progress until you start to get rid of some of that negativity, and you might choose to come back and reincarnate again in order to build some more positive sort of energy. But actually, there are evil people that have human experiences right now. Dark people, negative people that do things deliberately, and that actually, when they first enter the spirit world, I don't think that they necessarily become, angels and are suddenly corrected. I do think that if they want to and they choose to, they're open to progress, and I do think that those people are held back. Let's call them, go back to Noah's description of the police angels. There's an element of protection from other people crossing that limbo into that place I call heaven. But evil exists in this world, sadly, sometimes through the conditions of planet Earth and those unconditional law that damage, mental health and psychological health. But it can become very confusing when people are talking about what is not normal for them, what is perhaps paranormal, and then trying to understand, this energy or this intelligence behind the energy. It's quite a tough one. So I'm keen to get your thoughts on that, and also keen for you to tell us a little bit more about how we could possibly teach people to discern truth, knowing the difference. Because Neil and I, before we went live, I spoke about psychosis, and I spoke about, as a minister, perhaps going to people's houses when something goes bump in the night, they want us to investigate. And you're going to be interested in really interesting activity when actually other religions summon the request of a spiritualist minister to come, because they've been unable to clear whatever it was that was going on in that house. But actually, 9 times out of 10, it's been the conditions of their earthly experience and the energy that's built up within that life that has caused that, and spirit have just turned up. But through a coordination of perhaps Hollywood and psychosis, people become convinced there's something really evil and dark perhaps in their house, and actually it's just helping them through that. And it's almost like mental health first aid for those people, as opposed to spiritual ministers. So what are your thoughts, and how do we discern the truth?
Well, and that, in fact, Jodie's comment there, so someone can put a spell on you, then, is actually a good start point, I think. Can someone put a spell on you? So let's try and discern that. So let's try and discern that between us. I think somebody can make a suggestion of negative stuff. So it's about intention, right? So if somebody puts that intention out there and you're aware of it, or you're aware of energetic things, then it, or hyper attuned to it, should we say, or gets you to a point of overwhelm, which is then often cognitive dissonance kicks in, depression, anxiety, and all the other sort of modern mental health ailments. Which is often just a disparage between who we actually need to be and who we are, and what we're presented as being, or who we're forced into being. So I would say personally, if someone put a spell on you, if you let them, that's how I would sum that up. If in your meditative practices you imagine yourself just light emanating from you as almost like a shield, perhaps, and visualize that if you meditate, and if you don't and try and go there, chakra points aligned and everything else, then I'm sure you'd be fine. What do you think of that, Ashley? How would you discern that in terms of?
Absolutely. I think you mentioned one of those points in particular about if you allow it. I might be a sucker for the spiritual life, but I also think that there is nothing more powerful than light. Darkness versus light. Light can always extinguish darkness, but darkness cannot suffocate light. And in that sense, light is more powerful. But if you believe in that power of the light as opposed to the power of darkness. So I worked out in the Turks and Caicos Islands in a law enforcement scenario, and although a very sort of Christian sort of foundation country, they absolutely believed in the power of black magic, spells, and voodoo. And when they were dealing with customers who also believed in that, they wanted nothing to do with it, and they wanted to avoid it because they believed in the power of it. And I think there's something in that. If you believe in the power of prayer, prayers are more powerful. Right? If you believe in sending absent spiritual healing, and you practice the power of that absent healing, the power of that affirmation, that power of a positive thought can be there. So if you believe it's possible for someone to say your negative thoughts and put a spell on you, then it can happen. And I think that they have that power. But equally, if you believe that you are not going to let that spell, stop something good from happening, and that you're well protected, then that can happen too. And there's no way that I would walk into a house where someone has just said me is haunted and there's bad stuff going on without me sending my guide team in advance, And I often have so real simple terms of that. I talk about my forward intelligence team. So, you're a military man, but it's like, right, I'm sending the guide team ahead. Right, we got the address. Before I arrived, you go and do a reconnaissance exercise. You tell me what's going on. And actually, if there's anything negative there, deal with it before I arrive. And then I've got the equivalent of my special forces, guard team that have been there watching the place.
Lock and load.
Yeah, perimeter fence, nice and secure, nice and safe. I've got my guide team, my gatekeeper on that place between here and sort of limbo. And then the only people that I deal with and speak to are the people that have already gone through my guide team. And my guide team aren't letting anyone get anywhere close to me, even an evil entity that is going to be able to harm me. Now, because I believe that, you could say, well, you're wrong, Ash, and absolute evil could hurt you. Actually, I think this about that relationship with my guide team and sort of protecting it. Does that mean that I can't be hurt in any sort of way? Possibly not. It's about protection. It's about continuing to protect. It's about not mixing the disciplines. I love spirit in terms of Jack Daniels. I love spirit in terms of spiritualism. The two don't play well together. So I would never work with my gifts while under the influence of alcohol or sleep deprived or not feeling 100% health. It's about that personal sort of discipline for me to be at my best and not mixing the two sort of disciplines. And because of that, because of the relationship with the guide team, I think, someone can put a spell on me, but it's going to be like a mirror. My fence is not really special forces in the spirit world, although there's probably a few ascended masters up there that might have had that special forces background. And even within pagan and white magic, you talk about, turn or be turned. If someone's sending something negative, it's going to hit them like a mirror and come back. It's about that belief in that power. I think understanding how it sort of works. So I waffled a little bit there, but did I answer your second point?
My second point, or yeah,
yours,
absolutely.
I think you answered Jill's, Jodie's well. But,
so I've just gone back to the screen, saw the question again. Yeah, absolutely. So the truth discernment, then that's where it becomes really difficult, because as humans having this human experience, this human existence, and no matter what your belief structure, system, or otherwise, where you are in life, one of the key things, whether spiritual or not, is emotional intelligence, and that's what separates the sheeple, shall we say, from the people that I would like to have a beer with. Do you know what I mean? So, and that a lot of the things we're experiencing in our society these days are intended to be divisive, are intended to manipulate, to control. So if you imagine dogmatic religious viewpoints, as we covered earlier, they don't work anymore because people have seen the light. So now what's happening is we're starting to see, or people see truth and they're able to discern the truth themselves. So what are we starting to see? Well, the introduction now of UFOs and unidentified flying whatever, or aerial phenomenon as they're called these days. So is there another mechanism of control coming in? There's obviously the few years we've had as a society all over the world, global impacts of it. Truth discernment, I think, starts with emotional intelligence. So if you can see something and you think that's making me feel some kind of way, and you're not able to satiate that and calm that and then see it from an objective or fact-based viewpoint, then part of the problem might be with you and your own struggles with mental health, or your own ongoing finding your place in this world in terms of the spirituality or belief systems or otherwise. So emotional intelligence, I think, is key. There's many others. There's 10 different things really. There's such as data accuracy and fact-checking information and objective truth discernment and stuff, but that's not what this channel is about, is it? And that's why that sort of list, I realized that halfway through, I wrote this list about what I would objectively and logically teach people to understand in terms of truth discernment. But that's not this crowd, and that's not taking anything away from everyone here. It's just that you all feel things, and your heightened feels. So we have to appeal to that, and the baseline is emotional intelligence, I think. What do you think, Ash?
Absolutely, and the ability to be able to, to read that scenario, read that situation, read your audience is, it's really powerful. And Danielle was just talking about mental health and how mental health issues could be sort of soul defragmentation.
That's a good look at it.
Yeah, I've not heard that word defragmentation for a while.
I'm writing that down.
Windows 3.11 for anyone that's my sort of age, and installing Microsoft operating system on floppy disks and having to defrag your hard drive. For me, is a nice little visual record there of everyone has mental health, and our poor health or bad health, this idea of defragmentation and having to get everything back in order and sort of get that focus. I think that it's a really sort of nice visual way of putting it and being able to top up. I mentioned that there's a thin line as a spiritual counselor / medium / celebrant / trainee minister / mental health first aider when I get a call to go to someone's house, because there's often issues there. It's understanding what those issues are and then being really clear about what hat I'm wearing. And sometimes people want you to come to the house and give them a reading, and other times they really need that counselling. Perhaps they're going through some bereavement. Other times there is poor mental health in the household. Perhaps there is dependencies, a need for social services and other sort of stuff going in. So Julie was just saying negative energy is often created by us humans, the energy we give off. And I think that we've all walked into a room after someone's had an argument, right? We can feel that energy build up. And if a place is old and there's been lots of arguments over a period of time, then it's like a sponge. It sort of absorbs it, and then being able to clear it or cleanse it is important.
Try being sort of like shut down in an autistic way to it, but working on military bases and working in morgues and things, just like off the charts, just crushing sort of horrible feels,
I think that often explains some of the temperatures differences in places you feel, and as a sort of carbon and scout camping and all these greenfield sites, and some of my favorite places were the grounds of old sort of hill forts and castles, and there would definitely be bits of areas you'd go to and it was almost constantly cold, or other bits were sort of warmer and you could feel the energy change. And I've loved Portsmouth historic shipyard, going into some of the old ships like Victory and seeing the wreckage of Mary Rose and things like that, and you can feel that energy. You can feel that energy changes.
It's like a Buckler's Yard. Is it Buckler's Yard, that place where they've built the ships? Buckler's Yard? They built all the Napoleonic warfare sort of ships, that sort of era. Wow. Interesting times.
And folks, what we sort of tried to do today, you've had the opinion of Ash and the opinion of Neil. Some of those opinions have interfaced quite nicely, and there's other end of the spectrum. Not quite the Buddha and Hitler spectrum, but the fact is we're all.
Wait, who was I in that scenario?
You definitely wasn't anywhere near Hitler. I think we were both down the Buddha end of the water. I'd like to think in terms of our forward thinking. But we've tried to give you some of our sort of thoughts and feelings and sort of opinions on this, and I know that we've had a sort of a constant group of people coming through, engaging with the show tonight. It's been really fantastic to sort of have you here. I'll let Neil sort of come in. Last sort of couple of comments for the evening, folks. So I'll let you come in with what Stacey's just said.
First of all, thanks for having me, Ash. It's been great. I've learned some cool things tonight from you, from the comments, from Richard. It's been brilliant. Stace, goodbye, good evening. Defamiliar. You've stitched me up with that. It's a big word.
Defamiliarization.
Oh, it's easy for you to say. Defamiliarization is a way of defragging what is familiar and putting it back together in a different way in order to make sense of it or see it from another perspective. Yeah, I'd say that's like transmutation as well, in terms of turning something negative into something positive in its broader sense. But yeah, that's a very on point comment. Thanks, Stacey, and thanks again, everyone, for putting up with me tonight.
No, Neil, it's been absolutely fantastic to have you here on this show. We're back live with Being Spiritual in 2 weeks' time. I'm going to be running hopefully an experiment with Richard on artificial intelligence. So one of the things I'm looking to do is to give readings from communicators, bring forward also some of your guides, and then based on the evidence that they provide, we're going to stick that into the supercomputer and ask the artificial intelligence to show us what that person might look like. And for your communicators, you should be able to live verify whether or not the artificial intelligence has got that right, if the evidence from me and my guides has sort of made sense. So you do come back and follow that in the next 2 weeks, folks. Neil has got a variety of opportunities with sort of round tables and things coming up as well. So do head over to SPTV UK. Make sure that you have bookmarked that website. You've got an idea about the schedule. You know what's sort of going on. There's so many fantastic things happening on Spiritual Psychics TV. You've got the Divine Service at Wimbledon this Sunday morning at 11 o'clock with Daniela Florio. And I think we may have some adverts to finish the show with. But thank you so much for Richard, our producer this evening, for putting this all together.
Thanks,
for
everyone.
those of you that have stayed through, 90 minutes has absolutely flown by this evening.
It has, hasn't it? It's gone really quick.
For those who have stuck with us, thank you so much. For those of you watching on playback, thanks for doing that. Got some nice feedback and some love there. Love, light, and laughter to you all, folks. Neil, any closing words?
No, just good night from me, and it's
good night from me.
And good night from him. I thought that's what we're gonna. Yeah. Oh well.
I didn't know the catchphrase, but yeah.
Oh, we'll work on that. We'll work on that. No, again, thank you. It's been enlightening. Cheers. Really cool.
Good night. God bless. Thank you, folks.